Welcome to the next episode of the Lawyers Coach podcast. I'm Claire Rayson and I am here as always with co-host Oliver Hansard. Oliver, thanks for joining me.
Lovely to be here and lovely to talk, Claire.
And I believe that in this episode you have been talking to Nikki Edwards, who is a commercial disputes lawyer and mediator partner at Howard Kennedy. So what did Nikki have to talk about?
Oh, we had a great conversation, bursting with energy. She was great company. We covered a whole range of topics. She talks quite a lot about the culture at Howard Kennedy and how she enjoys the fact that they're so keen to give their lawyers the space to be extraordinary, which I thought was a lovely way of putting it. We talk about litigators as problem solvers, the sort of person you talk to rather like your plumber when things go wrong. That's where you go. You go to your litigator, which I thought was great. We finish with a range of DE&I activities that she's working on in Howard Kennedy, which gives her and me, I suppose, great optimism on that front in the firm and in the industry more broadly.
Fantastic. And I know how passionate Nikki is about DEI. So let's press play and see what Nikki had to say.
Nikki, welcome to the podcast. Lovely to have you here.
Lovely to be here. Thanks, Ollie.
We always like to start with our guests to find out a little bit about their background and how they came to be involved in the legal industry. So how did you end up at Howard Kennedy as a partner and a litigator?
I'm new to the role, so I've actually only been at Howard Kennedy since September. Kind of what brought me to the law in the first place, I think, was the idea of being rich.
Brilliant. I love your honesty. No one's ever said that before. That's brilliant.
Well, and I think my idea of rich was not, being Richard Branson. It was my background is I grew up in a working class background, and I didn't know anybody who'd been to university or had a professional job, but I did go to a kind of local primary school where some of the families were more well off than us, and they had a nice house and they had a nice holiday and they had a nice car, and that was rich, and that is what I wanted to be. And so I thought at that point in my life that you either had to be a doctor, an accountant, or a lawyer. So I picked a lawyer because that was most suited to me. I've always had kind of a strong sense of justice and naturally advocated for myself and for other people, so it felt like an obvious thing. So I kind of did the usual thing, went to university, got a training contract at a really great national firm in Nottingham, which is where I went to university. So I had a really good training there, stayed there for a couple of years, and then felt that I wanted to do bigger work, really. I joke now with the partner that trained me then, because I said, I'm going to go to London and I'm going to do injunctions. And he said, okay, then, good for you. Off you go. So that's
no injunctions in Nottingham. Are they not available?
Well, I think that's what he was thinking. He was like, you can do injunctions here. But, I had these grand ideas that I wanted to come to London, work, do the bigger work, etc. And that is what ended up happening. So I worked for a few years at Kingsley Napley in the city, did some really great work there. And then I went to Quinn Emanuel, which is a big US litigation boutique. And then I had my first child, and I went back to Quinn Emanuel, but quite quickly realized that it wasn't the right place for me to be when I was thinking about having a family. I wanted to progress my career, but I also wanted to have autonomy and flexibility. And that wasn't something that was going to be open to me at the level that I was at while I was there. So I took a bit of a gamble and moved to a consultancy-based law firm, which meant that I was a partner in name. So that was I had been a senior associate. So that was kind of progression for me, which was quite important. Mm-hmm. I had to get all of my own work. It was an eat what you kill model. So that was a new challenge, because previously I'd been fed work and done the work rather than having to bring it in myself. So it kind of gave me that opportunity to feel that I was really progressing and moving forwards despite having a family. But at the same time, it gave me the flexibility and the autonomy that I needed to run my own cases, decide how much work that I did, how many cases I took on, etc. And so, yeah, had a really great time there. I had another child. I did some great work. I proved to myself that I could bring in the work and sort of win cases against big law firms on the other side, which was nice. But then when my youngest child started school, I felt it was time to go back to the traditional world of a traditional law firm. I wanted to be part of a business that was bigger than myself. So, you know, for the 7 years prior, I'd been running a business and doing everything, but it was really just about me. And I wanted to be part of something much bigger, and to grow something bigger. I missed working with a team. I missed bringing on juniors. I wanted the infrastructure and the support of a well-established law firm. But having had those 7 years where I'd had so much freedom and flexibility, not at any cost. You know, I was very happy and I'd built this great life for myself, but I just felt that I was ready to kind of move on to the next challenge. And so I really needed to find the right fit, which was sort of somewhere that was ambitious and growing, somewhere with a supportive culture and values that reflected my values, and where I could continue to build my practice in the way that I had been. And Howard Kennedy turned out to be a great fit for me. So, as I said, I joined them in September, and so far, so good.
You talk about aligning of values, which I always find fascinating. We talk about values a lot on the podcast. How would you articulate those values that aligned with Howard Kennedy?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I probably ought to have known what the official brand values were before I started in my research of looking into the firm. I didn't. I got the vibe from talking to the various people. I had about 6 meetings. I met about 25 people in the firm, and I got the vibe from them in terms of the type of people they were, what they were interested in, and what they were interested in me doing. However, when I joined the firm, I saw on the wall in big, bold letters that the values are think smart, talk straight, be yourself. And I just thought that is fantastic, because it could not represent me anymore. It is exactly who I am. And so it was a nice coincidence, because if it had been 3 phrases that I'd felt didn't at all work for me, then I might have felt differently. But yes, that's the values. And I was really interested to hear actually that they came about not by sitting around a table and deciding what do we want to be, what are our aspirations, our ambitions, but by getting external third parties to come into the firm, talk to everybody, and then tell us what our values were.
And that be yourself value, that third one, that really sounds what you were looking for, in that you wanted a structure and an environment where you could be yourself. You could still be a mum. You can still have that flexibility. You mentioned autonomy, so that seems to be a really important one in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that I can be myself, but also that everyone else can be themselves. And it's, we don't need to be cookie cutter versions of each other. And I wanted to work in a culture where we can kind of celebrate everyone's individuality and actually see the value in that, and use the value in that. So we actually have a new EVP, employee value proposition, I think it stands for.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is Howard Kennedy gives you space to be extraordinary or extraordinary. And it's kind of all about giving people the space to be themselves and do what they want to do. So for me, a good example, actually, a real life example, is one of my non-negotiables when I was looking at joining the partnership of a traditional law firm, was that I wanted to continue with my mediation practice. So when I left the US law firm and I went to become a consultant, I trained to be a mediator. And for the last 5 years, alongside my legal practice, I've also been working as a mediator. I know and am aware that mediation is not hugely profitable in the same way as bringing in the work, doing the work, feeding the team, etc. And so on a pure economic analysis, I think a lot of law firms would say, well, yeah, you can't really do that here. That's not what you're here to do. We're a law firm and we need you to bring in the work and bill the fees, etc., supervise the team. But for me, the mediation is personally very important. I also feel that it makes me a better lawyer, that it actually gives added value to my clients. And it wasn't something that I was prepared to compromise. And actually, it wasn't even a question. They were absolutely happy for me to do that. And, I was kind of prepared to have to sell it to them and have all of these discussions. But in fact, they very quickly understood the value of it and were very happy for me to continue doing that. And I think that's a really good example of this, them kind of encouraging you to be yourself and follow your ambitions and passions, because I'm not sure that would have been the same answer in other law firms in the city.
Fantastic. I'm always intrigued when I talk to litigators to understand how they do their business development, because if you're a corporate lawyer, you know businesses that are going to do deals. If you do banking, you know they're looking to finance projects, whatever it might be. But with the litigators, it's a line of work that your clients nearly always don't want to be in, and you don't know who's going to need your services. So how do you go about finding that litigation client? Hopefully, consistently, a consistent litigation client.
So it's interesting because I hear this all the time, that litigation is a distressed purchase. It's very difficult to do business development, etc., etc. And I hear that from litigators and non-litigators, and have really grown up being told that. So I think when I was a couple of years qualified, I believed it. Okay. And I thought, oh yes, it's much harder for litigators. But actually now, a bit more experience and having done this job for a little bit longer, I almost think it's the opposite, because litigators are problem solvers. And I think we all know as individuals, the time when we really want that help from an experienced, qualified individual is when we have a problem. So, the corporate lawyers are doing things like, you might be doing a big renovation project on your house that you don't need to do, but you want to do. So it's very exciting. And that's fine. And you might have a bit of a grumble with your builders because, they're not doing it quick enough, or there's always problems, aren't they? But you get there in the end. But when you've got a tap that's leaking, you want that plumber to come in. You want them to be responsive. You want them to fix it immediately. You want them to wrap their arms around you, metaphorically, and tell you, it's okay. I am going to fix this for you. I know what I'm doing. You can carry on with what you need to do. And I feel like that's really my role as a dispute resolution lawyer, is that when people are in crisis, I come in as that safe pair of hands, that trusted advisor, and say, I will look after you. You can get on with running your business. I'm very good at this. I'm very experienced. And I'm going to look out for your interests and fix it for you. When you fix that problem for them and you have a great result, they're really happy and they're really grateful. So of course they're going to recommend you to their friends. They're going to use you again. They're going to tell their colleagues what a great job you've done. So I don't think it is as much of a challenge as people say. And I think it's perhaps just the way that you look at it, and also the way that you sell yourself. If you're saying to people, oh, you won't want to talk to me because when you talk to me, it means you've got a problem, and and you kind of give that vibe off, then that's how they're going to feel. If you say, I'm the person you want in your phone, because when you have a problem, you call me and I come and sort it out for you, then of course that, they're thinking, yes, absolutely, you're the person I want on my team when I'm in that crisis situation. So I think that in terms of how do you business develop, how do you get, that first instruction that then results in the repeat instructions, I think it's really about building and nurturing those relationships so that on a personal level, individuals, businesses know you and trust you. And therefore, when the time comes that they're in crisis, you are the person that they think of, you're the person that they want, looking after them.
And so as you look forward with your practice, and as we come through these tricky economic times, how optimistic are you?
I'm quite optimistic. I think it's a really exciting time. Obviously we're in an economic downturn. It's difficult economic times, but as litigators, that's usually not a bad thing for us. So we're slightly let off the hook in that regard, and often it results in more litigation. And because we are actively growing our team, so one of the reasons that I joined the firm is because I wanted to be part of something that was actively growing. It wasn't necessarily, didn't consider itself to be the finished product, and it was ambitious. That's the situation in our team, and so I think that's helpful because it means we're not looking just to maintain the status quo. We're actually looking to grow the team, grow the revenue.
And how easy is recruitment at the moment?
Well, I mean, we're getting a lot of CVs actually. So again, I did notice that in some of the surveys that have been circulated, people are saying that recruitment is an issue. And I know one of the things that will have been of concern to us a couple of years ago is the huge salary hikes that happened in the kind of magic circle in the US firms, because we're not competing with those firms. And so if you're an NQ and you want to be paid £130,000 a year, then we're not going to be able to recruit, those individuals. And so I think that was a concern for the firm, but it just hasn't really come to pass. We haven't had an issue with retention. Certainly in our team, I was thinking about this, and I think about 10. There's a team of about 35 fee earners, including partners, and about 10 of our team actually trained at the firm, including 3 senior associates. So people come and people stay, which is a really good thing.
And then with the recruitment, again, looking at your values, which I think are really strong, how easy is it to find lawyers that slot neatly or are well aligned with those values? I mean, the think smart, you'd hope that would be common in a lawyer, one would assume. That almost kind of contradiction in some respects of talk straight and be yourself. How's that been in terms of recruiting people that align to those 2 values?
I think it's a real driver in terms of who we recruit. So I've been involved in interviewing candidates since I joined the firm, and the discussion afterwards is about those values. And if we decide that we're not going to take that candidate any further, for example, it will naturally be because, well, they really fell short on the talking straight, or whatever it may be. And so I think it's actually almost subconsciously, we don't start off we don't have a chat beforehand and say, right, we must think about these categories and then decide if they're kind of ticking those boxes. But I think it's kind of a natural thing that you go through the interview and you get the feel for whether that individual really fulfills those values. And if somebody is trying to oversell something, or you ask them a question and they don't give you a straight answer, perhaps understandably, because they're in an interview situation and they feel they want to present themselves in the best way possible, it's really noticeable, and it makes you think, well, are they really going to fit in here? Because this is such a fundamental part of how we work, both within teams, internally, but also with our clients. Then it probably isn't going to be the right fit. So as much as you might see the value in that person, and they're probably a fantastic lawyer, it's quite easy to say, actually, you're probably not for us. And at the same time, I'm sure when people are looking at what firms they want to apply to, we talk a lot about our culture. It's there on the internet, it's out there. And certainly with the new employee value proposition, the idea of that is to really communicate to potential recruits, what they can expect working at the firm. And so I think to some extent it's also probably quite self-selecting in who wants to come and work for us.
Obviously you're new to the firm. How much of a priority is diversity, equity and inclusion in the way that you run the team and work in the litigation department?
So I've been really impressed with the commitment to this. It's something that I am personally very passionate about. And within the first few months of working in the team, I've actually been given the opportunity to share my ideas and engage on this topic a number of times, which I've been very pleased about, because I think all firms are saying the right things. But the question is, are they, putting their money where their mouth is? And so maybe to give some real life examples of the things that I've done in my short time there. First of all, within literally, I think I'd only been there for about 2 weeks, and I was invited to speak on a panel for an event that we were hosting at the firm for our charity partner, which is Making the Leap. And that's a fantastic charity. It's a grassroots societal change charity based in London, and they aim to transform the futures of young people from less advantaged socioeconomic backgrounds. So, it's something that's very close to my heart because that's where I came from. And the charity kind of provide training to boost aspirations and help to develop the skills. So I was asked to speak on this panel, which was to talk about my journey into the career. And I was joined by 4 of my colleagues and also the managing partner who told his story. And we had 80 fellows there listening to us. And so that was a really fantastic opportunity to see that they're actively doing things around social mobility. And something that I was really impressed with was it turns out that we do a kind of work experience scheme for Making the Leap. And one of the individuals from that scheme was at the event, and he had been recruited. So he now worked at Howard Kennedy, which obviously that's a coincidence, and it wasn't a foregone conclusion from having been part of it. But it was just really nice to see as a real life example of, actively putting your money where your mouth is, I suppose. And then the other thing is I've also been encouraged and supported to explore the gender gap at partner level in law firms. It's something I'd written an article for The Lawyer about that before I joined the firm. And it's actually something I was asked about in the interview process in a very positive way. I wasn't sure what they would think about it because it was a little bit controversial. But in fact, they were just really keen to hear my thoughts and ideas. And so when I joined the firm, I hosted a round table where I invited sort of 16 people from a broad cross-section of the profession to discuss and share ideas. And my head of department attended. And I've then been encouraged to feed back to the wider firm, speak at department meetings about it. And I'm now organising smaller group sessions on a Chatham House basis for the non-partners in my team. So I've kind of done a write-up of the roundtable, circulated that and said, I'm really interested to know your thoughts and ideas. Sign up. I've done a few sessions, sign up if you're interested, obviously no obligation. And I've had a lot of interest in that. And I think for me, what's been really gratifying is the fact that, my team leader, my head of department and the firm generally have been so supportive of me doing this, despite the fact that I'm quite new to the firm and, arguably still need to prove myself. They've not made me wait. They've said, yeah, brilliant, run with it. And what do you need from us? What resources do you need? Go for it. So that's a real positive for me.
And fantastically supportive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you got in your mind what success might be for this chapter of your career?
I mean, there's various kind of things that I'm interested in. I'm very passionate about diversity, equity and inclusion, for example, and that's something that I made clear before I joined the firm and, something that I want to pursue, as well as growing my practice. So there are kind of various projects and things that would be goals. But I think in terms of success and what success looks like, I don't really see it as something far away in the future that I'm working towards. I kind of look at it as more of an ongoing thing. So this week I might feel successful. Next week I might not feel so successful. And I think whether I do, it depends on whether I feel energized and inspired to do the job that I'm doing. Is it fulfilling for me? And am I making a positive impact on those that I'm working with, whether that's my colleagues, whether that's clients, whether that's the kind of wider legal profession? And I think if the answer to that is yes, then that is success to me, then I feel successful. But I definitely don't see it as a thing that I'm striving to achieve, and once I've achieved it, it's mine, and I've done it, and that's it. That's everything there is to do. I think it's much more fluid.
And so if you were to have that conversation with that 8-year-old girl in the playground at primary school who started to think about being a lawyer, would you say to her, what would you be able to articulate to her what success would be?
I think that's the other thing, is that, from a very personal perspective, I already have succeeded. I'm lucky enough to work in the profession that I wanted to work in, and that didn't feel like a foregone conclusion, given my background and experience. It was very much a kind of pie in the sky thing when it was something that I first decided that I wanted to do. So I think, for the 8-year-old girl, I absolutely have already succeeded. This is what I wanted to do, and this is what I'm doing. And I think it's quite important not to let go of that as well, because particularly within the legal industry and the way that it works with the kind of milestones, and you get your training contract, then you're qualified, then you're promoted, then are you going to be a partner, then are you going to be an equity partner? It's this never-ending kind of hamster wheel, and people do find themselves on the hamster wheel, and they don't have time to look up and look around to see if they're happy with what they're doing. But also they often don't have time to look back and reflect on what they have achieved already. And I think, I've tried quite hard not to fall into that trap. And so if I kind of stand here today and look back to me as a young girl, then I feel like I've absolutely succeeded. And it's just a case of now, the day to day, the week to week, maintaining that and ensuring that I'm ultimately happy doing the job that I'm doing.
Nikki, that's a really lovely place to end the conversation. Thank you ever so much for your time and for being a fantastic guest on the Lawyers Coach podcast. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Nice to chat.
So that was Oliver Hansard talking to Nikki Edwards there. So again, my mind's racing with thoughts and follow up from Nikki's conversation. But what was it that really stood out for you?
I think probably 2 or 3 things. Early on in the conversation, we talked about how the firm looks to recruit people that align with the culture and values that they're looking for, and I just think that's so crucial in any organization, obviously law firms, but any organization, to really make sure that you have a group of people that align around a common set of behaviors and purpose.
Well, it's really interesting coming off the back of last episode where we spoke to Rob and we talked about offices and actually often we kind of get caught up in where are we doing what we're doing rather than how are we doing what we're doing, and this idea of culture so much tied to how we do what we do, and again this idea of culture being the real driver coming through in Nikki's conversation. I think the other thing that kind of I found interesting, and I always find it interesting with a BD hat on, that litigation is often seen to be the hardest thing to sell, because who wants to sell litigation? It normally means that your client is either has a problem or has a problem either way, doesn't it? Whether it's on the receiving end of a dispute or whether it's the one bringing the dispute. But reflecting on the conversation that you had and this idea of trusted advisors, and actually maybe it's helpful for litigators because they don't necessarily sell what it is that they do. They can focus on building those relationships. And they know that if those relationships are strong, the work will come. So that for me was something that really resonated.
Absolutely. And she really strikes me as that sort of person that you would want when you're in real trouble. And, building that trust has to be done over time. It can't be in the moment. And so building that trust with clients over time is absolutely critical for solving those really, really tough moments.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was a lovely, lovely conversation to listen to, and I'm sure it was really enjoyable for you to have the chat with Nikki. So for our next episode, I am going to be talking to Lexi Segal, who is in-house at BT. And we had a brilliant chat around diversity. BT are really pushing the dial with their clients and really challenging the firms that they work with to think about this topic in a slightly different way. And I can't wait for you all to hear what Lexi had to say next week.
Really excited, Claire. Thanks ever so much. And thanks to you for listening.
Lawyers Coach is brought to you by Client Talk and Hansard Coaching. If you're a lawyer and would like to take part in Lawyers Coach, please visit our website lawyercoach.co.uk for further details. And you can also join the conversation on our LinkedIn group Lawyers Coach. If there are any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, then just get in touch.